integrated yoga therapy. She's a professional member of ISAPS and has been a consultant and trainer both for profit and for non-profit organizations. She herself has founded and then managed as an executive director two not-for-profit organizations working for the health of women and children. She's a faculty with the ICF-affiliated coach training organization, Leadership That Works, India. She's currently pursuing her master's in yoga from the Vyasa University, Bangalore, India. She has multiple publications to her credit, both in the field of health and also on appreciative inquiry. And I think the topic that she's going to talk about today, which is from stressed being to well-being, lessons from ancient yogic wisdom and modern knowledge. And I'm really looking forward to the bridge that Wasundhara is going to create between these two. And I think with her background, she has mastery of both these worlds. So really looking forward to this session, Wasundhara. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. And yeah, just wanted to say that, this bringing together the two worlds of ancient knowledge that exists in this country and many other countries, but I know more about what we have here. And, modern science has been one of the most exciting things that has happened to me, because I think I've just been able to see health and well-being and disease from a very, very different perspective. Which I didn't have when I was being, just a standard medical kind of doctor. So I'm excited to be sharing this, and thank you for joining. I see lots and lots of familiar faces, and thank you. I'm going to just put up a little bit. We have a few slides to share, just the learning agenda. This is what I wish to cover. Connecting different theories of well-being and stress, looking at what do we mean by stress on a daily basis and why it is important to look at stress, the hidden cost of it really. The three states, which I will come to, I know it sounds a bit cryptic just like that, but I will leave it there. And also learning how to shift out of the different states, which are basically between well-being and not feeling well or feeling stressed. So let me stop sharing this. Our ancient knowledge, Yoga Vasisht. So what I have, I was quite surprised to know that actually stress is not mentioned as stress, but the understanding of stress is really, really old. And Sri Ram was speaking to Rishi Yoga Vasisht, and the conversation is recorded in the Yoga Vasisht. And in that, Yoga Vasisht Rishi, Sri Ram asks Vasisht Rishi, what is stress? And what he says is that when the mind is agitated, the body goes into a state of agitation. And on account of agitation, the vital airs flow, giving up their evenness. And that is a state of stress. Just the mind getting agitated leads to agitation in the body. And that is what causes stress. And I think what is exciting is that we have modern science today with its research and its ability to measure stuff, which is now able to actually show exactly what is going on. When the frame that our old rishis had was a very different frame. They had the frame of yoga, and I'm using yoga in its very broadest sense, and not necessarily just what Rishi Patanjali spoke about, but yoga as a union of mind and spirit, Paramatma with the Jivatma, all of that. And the frame they had was intuiting inwards what is happening inside the body, and they created their own language for it. Whereas today, the same thing we are able to measure and see with experiments, and see under a microscope or measure with instruments, and so we have biological proof, not a nice word, but a biological matches to what has been described in very, very ancient Indian scriptures. So what is stress? I mean, stress is essentially pressure or tension exerted on an object. And for human beings, it's really emotional strain largely that we call stress. And our ability to survive as a race really depends on our ability to adapt to stress, to be able to deal with stress, because stress it's not a bad word. It's just how we stress is part of life. And it's how we deal with stress, which is what makes it good or bad. Stress by itself makes, the system stronger and the system more resilient. So I think we sometimes tend to see it as something that's very bad. And, that's perhaps not the best way of looking at it. Okay, so I'm going to we're going to do a little exercise now. And if you all can look at just points in your daily life, just day-to-day life, every day, with, and maybe 2 or 3 highlights that you feel stress you out. We're not even talking of major issues here. You could also have those, but I think just life has become quite stressful today. So, maybe you want to make a list of a couple of the things that stress you out the most in the day. And if some of you would like to put that in the chat box, we can have a look at that. Not sure you can unmute yourselves and speak up, but definitely you can put in the chat box. Yes, work, yeah. What else? Relationships, absolutely. Husband and son littering the house. Yes, hi, Saparna. Yes, I can relate with that. Worries, absolutely. Worrying about many things. And perhaps feeling guilty about missing out on things, meeting requirements. And I think we do, today it's the uncertainty of what is happening, which is probably adding to everything even more. And that is, absolutely what creates stress. But what does being stressed mean? I think that's what we want to look at. So I'm going to present to you 2 frames of stress. So I'm going to go back to my presentation a little bit here. For understanding stress, one is from the Taittiriya Upanishad, and this is the Panchakosha Frame. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this, and if you are, I'd love to see a show of hands of those who do understand this frame. For me, this was a revelation, and I said, wow, this really can help me to deal with, to understand life and stress and health in a very different way. So this is the model of the human being that the Upanishads, which are the very ancient scriptures that we have, part of the Vedas, that's what they say. This is what a human being is. And we are not just this body. That's the body. This is the Annamaya Kosha. We are not just this body, but we have 5 layers of existence, 5 layers of consciousness, if you would like to say. And there's the body, and then there's the energy, which is the prana. We've all heard of things like pranayama, especially in today's world. The mind, the manomaya kosha, and then we have 2 more, the vijnanamaya and the anandmaya kosha. And what happens to us, and if we are to look at Vasundhara Joshi's definition of stress, it's uncontrolled speed of the mind. So it's agitation that begins in the mind. So if you see this manomaya kosha here, the agitation that begins in the mind because something didn't go the way I wanted, or I am, so it's either because I desire something. It's typically what either you desire something or you're running away from something you don't want. The raga and the dvesha, both of these cause stress. Because I want something, I really, I want that car, or I want the, the latest, or whatever it is, or I need that promotion. And there may be very legitimate reasons for it. I'm not getting into judging whether that's right or wrong. But that is what starts generating the agitation in the mind. Or I don't want something. I really want a clean house. I don't want to see an untidy house. Or I don't want this COVID epidemic anymore. It's creating too much stress for me. So not wanting something. So either we are running towards something or running away from something, but both of those create agitation in the mind, and uncontrolled speed of the mind is where stress begins. And then it basically just spills over into the outer layers. So from the mind, it spills into the energy body. So we all know that when we're stressed, we don't breathe well. And then, we don't breathe well, you might have a gastric upset. All those are forms of energy that are getting affected. And then when, even that doesn't happen, then it starts affecting our physical body, the Annamaya Kosha. So that is one definition or one understanding of stress. If you have any questions on this, you could either put them in the chat box or you can just unmute and ask if that is possible. I'm open to both. I'd be happy to see them as they come up. So I'm just covering a few concepts initially, I think, because that's what this whole thing is based on. So this is what is called Adhi, which is the mental stress, and the Vyadhi, which is the physical stress. So Adhi becomes Vyadhi. So this is the typical kind of stress-related issues that we see are this Adhija Vyadhi. And here we have a diagram, very complicated looking diagram, which is the physiological impact of stress, which is now measured and proven beyond doubt. It's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, basically the stress response. You've heard about the adrenaline, noradrenaline, all the biochemistry that happens, and how it starts affecting different systems in the body, from your blood glucose, and therefore hypertension, diabetes, effects on our behavior, immunology gets affected. And so stress today is the root cause of multiple disorders. Everything has been related back to stress, and modern medicine is recognizing that all non-communicable illness, so not if you get stung by a bee or if you have an accident, that is not directly related perhaps to stress, but anything else, whether it's mental disorders or physical disorders, including aging faster, brain health, Alzheimer's, malignancies, you name it. And the root cause is chronic inflammation and stress. And why does this happen? Because normal stress response is this one above. You feel you have a stressor, like maybe you got up in the morning with an alarm, and that itself can be quite stressful, just a loud noise if you've been sleeping deeply, and it instantly your stress response gets into action. But after that stressor is over, everything should come back to normal. And this is normal homeostasis, and we should come back to baseline. However, today, the stressors just come one after another, whether it's loud noises, whether it's work related, it's constant relationships where, and things have gotten worse. We are, still many of us are contained within houses, not moving out much, constant worry. So what happens is that the baseline shifts upward. Actually, it never gets a chance to come back to normal. Before it's come down, to normal, it just goes on rising. So essentially our baseline has got reset at a much higher level. And so the chances that we will have any of these outcomes related to the stress therefore become very, very high. So I want us to do another exercise where if you can look at what happens, you've listed what happens where you feel stressed during your day. Now, if you can take that forward in time and say, okay, so I'm taking a couple of things, worrying for various things. Suppose you've started worrying. Now, what is the outcome of that in your day? What happens, to your decision making? What happens to the tasks that you're supposed to do? So can you look at the impact that this stress is having on you? And maybe we can have a quick sharing of this as well, as in when you're welcome to unmute yourselves and speak up about what happens, how does stress affect you? And, what does it do to you as a person? Okay, indecision at times, lack of energy. Yes, thank you, Rajiv. I know what stress does to me. It makes me not a nice person at all. I tend to lose my temper and end up really becoming very reactive, and long-term stress. And I did go through, there was a time not very long ago when there was continuous stress for some, stuff around family happening. And I had become a really nasty person. When I think of how I used to be, I feel very grateful to my family that they tolerated me at that time. But that's what stress does. That's what stress does. You can't do anything. Yes, irritable, panic, get angry.
I feel tired.
Feel tired.
I get fatigued.
True. That is so true, because the mind is constantly going at some incredible speed, and that uses so much energy. You're so tired, you don't have energy to do anything else.
I keep eating.
You keep eating. Yes, because that
gain weight.
That makes stress eating, absolutely, because it makes you feel more centered. We'll talk a little bit more.
I'm wondering, is that really stress, or is it the way you cope with the stress? That's the way you cope. I'm wondering.
It is the way you cope with stress.
Because like when I'm tired, then I want to just sleep. Then I just go to sleep for long stretches.
And that's the way you cope with stress, right?
Due to anxiety, my sleep pattern also got distorted.
Yeah.
Sleep.
And that's the whole thing. I mean, I said this even earlier, that the stress itself may or may not be an issue. It's what we do with it. It's how we cope with it, how we react to it. That becomes the issue, really. And sometimes we can deal with it really well, and sometimes we deal with it in ways that are not very healthy, and that's when all these problems start. But more and more, I think people are finding it difficult to deal with stress. So can you see this? I think not. So I want to talk about, I'm coming to another frame of this. IBS, absolutely. Inflammatory bowel disease is a symptom of stress, lack of sleep, and that itself can generate more stress. So I'm introducing a couple of more frames here from the yogic perspective, yoga being used very, very loosely. This is the Sankhya philosophy in a way, but this is the concept of gunas, and the three states that any object or anything in this entire universe actually is a combination. In this material world, everything is a combination of these three what is called a guna. Guna is a quality, it's a property. And there are 3 properties that in various combinations create our material world. And these are the 3 states. We have sattva, rajas, and tamas. Again, some of you may be familiar with these things, and some of you may find this difficult. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, this is always, you know, trying to keep track of what is happening, a gallery view, and this is a little bit.
I think the bottom right, Vasu, bottom right corner.
More. I should be able to see the gallery view, but I seem to be not able to see it. Okay, you know, not even on the side. Anyway, it's okay. I'm going to keep track of the chat. But all of our experiences also can be therefore described as one of these 3 states being more predominant. Nothing, I think, is pure rajas or pure sattva or pure tamas, very little, but there will be the dominance of that. And as you can see, I mean, the world today seems to be largely in a state of rajas. Rajas is the mode of action, it's the movement, it's desire, it's passion. And also the other side of it, therefore, is greed, fear, and anger. And so when we are caught up in this activity and action mode, then we have a lot of, then this is what we end up with. And anxiety, you know, is also a rajasic place to be in. But we can also be in 2 other states. And I will talk about how that relates to stress. One is the sattva, which is, you know, a more lightness, discernment, resilience, connection, peace, joy. This is typically when your prefrontal cortex comes into action, when this great brain of ours is available. Then we can be generative, we can be creative. All that is part of the sattva guna. But rajas guna is in fact, the amygdala hijack is typically the rajas guna, which is, you know, that's what comes into action. And then there is tamas. Tamas is inertia, lethargy, inactivity, sloth, and decay. And other words, similar words, but essentially it's a lot of inertia. And there is a kind of hierarchy here, because to move out of tamas, if you want to move out of tamas, then one needs to move through rajas. And only then you can go to a sattvic state. From tamas, it is very difficult to go direct. In fact, you cannot directly jump to sattva. So because movement is required to shift the balance. All these 3 are, like I said, in varying states and proportions. But if we want to shift the proportion, then we need movement. And so rajas becomes really, really important. Now, other states, can you connect with this as part of your daily experience? Times when you feel rajas, when you feel a predominance of rajas, times when you feel a predominance of sattva, and times when you feel a predominance of tamas. And I'm sure we can all relate to these different times at different parts of the day or different times in the week. And maybe there is a reaction that this also comes from, these are also responses to stress. So just think about that. Is there a stress that leads to inertia? Some of us might respond with inertia. Some of us might respond with generativity and creativity to stress. And some of us might respond with movement, action, activity, and that's our way of dealing with stress. And of course, all of us respond like that at different times. It's not like we are stuck in one way all the time. And connecting it again with modern, what is coming up today. This is the work of Stephen Porges and what he calls the polyvagal theory, where there are the 3 states, again, of responding to stress, 3 states of being that we have. We can have the fight or flight reaction. We are so familiar with that. We can have a state of shutdown or freeze. And we have the third state, which is of social engagement, connection, generativity, and all that. And can you see now how, though this was something that he came up with in about 2008, how well these correlate with the theory of the three gunas. Different ways of looking at it, different ways of understanding it. But this is looking at it from a neurobiology perspective. And what happens here, so we're going to look at it a little more in detail, is that the autonomic nervous system, which is the system which is regulating our well-being and responses in many ways, heart rate, respiratory rate, the blood pressure, all these are regulated automatically. We don't think about how fast my heart is beating. Usually we are not in touch with how fast we breathe, for instance. So this is the system which is the automatic part of the brain, which is keeping our body physiology running, and which is keeping us in a way safe. So there are two parts to this autonomic nervous system, and they emerged at different times through the world, through evolution. That's the word I'm looking for, through evolution. The oldest is the dorsal vagal, which is associated with, it's called polyvagal because you can see there are two vagal systems that Stephen Porges came up. When I was a medical student, I learned only that there was the sympathetic, parasympathetic was the vagus nerve, and the sympathetic was the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which we saw earlier, which was, the whole the adrenaline and the corticosteroids and all those hormones that come into being, which are responsible for the fight flight. And then you had the rest and digest, or the time when you were not in a fight or flight, which was the vagus nerve, which allowed you to be more at rest and at peace. And that's what slows your heart rate, and you can, your blood pressure comes down and you can feel more at ease. But Stephen Porges came up with this, with his work, that there are actually two vagal systems, the dorsal vagal and the ventral vagal. And the ventral vagal is the newest in a way. And that's the one that allowed us to thrive, which allowed us to have social engagement, as against the dorsal vagal, which just was a shutdown freeze reaction, which is a state of extreme trauma in a way, because that is what happens when animals are about to die. Then I think nature in its kindness puts you in a state of such extreme shutdown and freeze that you actually don't feel the pain of death, especially in the jungle when you're getting eaten by a bigger animal. And that can happen to human beings also, because that's what happens when we, in trauma, especially severe trauma, when the system just shuts down. Most of the times we are familiar with the fight or flight when we are under threat. So you either want to go forward, push, or withdraw. That's the flight. I'm going to stop here for a second, or whatever, a minute or so, and see if there are any questions about this. Because what we will do after this is look at what we can, okay, what do we do about this? How do we shift states? That's the next part of the work that we are going to look at. So just taking a check here about questions or any statements that anybody would like.
I just had a question, Vasu. When you go to the gunas, I understand the guna is elements, basically the three elements. In the chart that you showed, what I noticed was that the first 3 or 4 qualities or adjectives of rajas are the positive, and then they move to the negative. The sattva has only positives listed, and the tamas has only negatives listed, while tamas, as I understand it, there's also stillness. Stillness is can be positive. So is there a reason why one has positive and negative, another has only positive, and another has only negative adjectives listed?
So yes, so Rajas is definitely has the two sides of the spectrum, much more obvious. Sattva is considered mostly a positive state of being. It is the state of well-being, actually. Of course, too much sattva, the only negative that can go with it is if you become too sattvic, you might want to withdraw completely from the world, which may be seen as a problem by the family or somebody, that you want to achieve, find spiritual truth or whatever. But actually the work of yoga is to increase more and more sattva in your body, because that is the element that is closest to achieving freedom or enlightenment. And tamas is inertia. Tamas is not necessary. Actually, stillness is a mix of sattva and tamas together. So that is what allows, and I will come to that, because in fact, that is what allows intimacy also, because to be able to be still you need to have that centeredness. Pure tamas is pure inertia. It's like nothing. It's like a blob. It's entropy, actually. So you have to move out of there. So stillness is a mixture of sattva and tamas. Like play is a mixture of sattva and rajas, and I'll come to that. So it's seen like that. So so this is what the adjectives I put here were like almost 100% of that. Then what will you get? But we are not 100% of it. Everything is a mix, and there's different predominant states, that the different states that we can get. Thank you for that. Manisha has put in a comment saying too much rajas leading to tamas. Tamas may be a reaction perhaps to too much rajas, but rajas is rajas, and you can switch to tamas from rajas, surely, if you find an overwhelm, like I can't deal with this. Then if the sense of overwhelm is too much, then you could just shut down and move to tamas. Right. Okay. So let me see, what is my next slide? So here, this is the one that I wanted to share, which is, I find fascinating this. So there is actually a paper, and I actually forgot to put the entire reference here. If somebody wants, I'll give it to you. Which has been published, which talks about this comparison between the Gunas and the polyvagal theory and how well they match. Of course, so yoga, the goal of yoga is to achieve, freedom, moksha, enlightenment, whatever that is. But somebody needs to go on mute, please. So this is the way the different states that we were talking about. So these are the states of being. So the fight flight is the sympathetic neural system. The predominant guna is rajas. I've put more the negative thing here because fight or flight comes from fear, anger, or greed. So we are now talking of the stress and how the stress can affect this. Social engagement as a state is typically a state of feeling safe and not feeling stressed. Therefore, the ventral vagus comes into action there, and this is what sattva allows for: safety, connection, clarity, calm, resourcefulness. All these are coming from this sattva guna and from the ventral vagal activation. So why I'm sharing this and why I got excited about it is that it gives us, we can now see why certain yogic practices work, if we need an explanation for it, and how certain practices that come from the somatic world and and more modern kind of practices also work. So it all kind of combines together for me, it came together very beautifully. Then we have the shutdown or the dorsal vagal activation, the tamas, and dissociation, delusion, ignorance. I've used different words here, but this is when you have a stress, from a place when you feel the pressure and the stress, and when it becomes extreme, when you go into a freeze reaction, then these things can happen. You can really dissociate from the world and actually go into your own world. And then there are the mixed states, like I was saying. You have play and dance, which is the ventral vagal, which allows for creativity, etc. But you need action. That should be SNS, sorry, the sympathetic nervous system coming online as well. So that's Rajas plus Sattva. I've said a little bit of Tamas because you always have a mix of the three. And, so Tamas might hold you. Tamas is in a way, it's not bad, because tamas is what gives you stability in that sense. So yes, Jasmeet, tamas gives you stability, but pure tamas and extreme of tamas is what we were talking about. And intimacy, because intimacy is interesting because you are allowing somebody to come into your space beyond what might be a normal boundary for you. And, that allows for you to feel really, really safe and to be still, to allow that to happen, including sex, for instance. And for that, you need tamas and sattva to be quite dominant. And only then that's what happens, social bonding, mother and child pairs, or most kind, any kind of intimate pairing that happens is when you have tamas and when sattva, or the dorsal and the ventral vagal both coming online. So things are not so black and white, and yet under stress they can get quite black and white. Was that helpful, Jasmeet?
Yes, but it still leaves a couple of questions.
Sure.
And one thing that was striking me, which isn't here, but to me, I was thinking when I was hearing you, is that the ultimate, I think, dysfunction of tamas would be what is called catatonia.
Absolutely.
People who are catatonic will probably have gone straight into only tamas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very right.
Vasu, sorry.
Yes, Vara.
How would you say intimacy is tamasic? A part of it is tamasic.
Because tamas is what allows you to be still and to be steady, to be stable. Because you need some degree of that to just be in one place.
Okay.
Tamas is what, keeps that stability going. If we didn't have
grounded,
tamas.
Do you mean grounded?
Some degree of grounding, yes. But more, grounding and stability. So it is what keeps continuity also. That is tamas, because, this body, this physical body that we have is there only because there is tamas in us. Mm. When we wake up in the morning, we've slept. When we remember who we are, that is tamas, which allows us to remember who we are. Otherwise, we'd have woken up every day and started from scratch wondering, who am I? Mm-hmm. Because in sleep, you have, tamas. There's a different thing that comes in. So but those may not be pure tamas. It will be tamas associated with some degree of sattva or rajas or something.
So next time when you're in an intimate space, you will be remembering you're in tamas and sattva.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see how
because I always thought tamas was, inertia, lethargy, inaction.
Yeah. So it has tamas. It has its value. It has its value. It allows continuity. Can tamas be our present, sattva be our future? Not really. Everything is present.
Everything
in the current moment.
Yeah.
It is all part of every experience. So each experience can also be defined as a predominance of one or the other guna. Each material can be defined as a predominance of one or the other guna. So it is what makes up the entire world. This mixture of the three gunas is what makes up the entire world, which is what is different about it than from the polyvagal theory, which is purely a biological theory and talking about what happens to our body and the different states that we are in. So how do we, so coming to one of the things I did want to look at is then what do we do? I mean, okay, so you go into a stress, there's stress and I go into either a fight or flight or I go into a freeze. Now what? How do I move out of a state? And I'm sure we all have our own experience of it. What was interesting to me was a quote was a statement I read, which was that going into a state of stress is, the stress response just happens. But relaxation and connection often have to be cultivated. Because the stress response is a survival response, right? So nobody has to teach you that. Like right from the time perhaps we were amoeba, that is the response that has gotten, that's part of the neural or whatever, the reactionary process that has come ever since the evolution of life. And that is so deeply embedded in us. So that is just happens because it's a survival response. It is also something that is more intense because it is a survival. It has to get you to move. Like, you can't just be waiting there and thinking, oh my God, now, typical story of being in the jungle and, maybe I'm a deer and there's a tiger coming towards me. I can't sit and think and strategize and say, how big is a tiger? How fast is it? I see a tiger, I need to run if I have to live. So it's a very instantaneous response that happens. And so we get, and the world that we are in today, where all these stressors are coming one on top of the other, I think this response has become quite the default for many, many, many of us. And we have to learn to shift the state. We have to learn to relax. We have to learn to let go. We have to learn to keep our connection. And when I say connection, I think the connection is not just with other people, it's connection to ourselves and it's connection to the world and the environment, the ground. All of that is part of, that's why, so that connection is something that we can make spontaneous, but it needs practice. And the beauty of the autonomic nervous system is that it learns with practice. So if we are going to be constantly reacting all the time, that's what it learns to do. And so that becomes the default for it. But if we can start learning to shift that response to a more rational response, because we are not in the jungle and our survival is not at stake. And actually, if we can be more, if we cannot be in the fight or flight space where we are, where the brain is actually shut down, the cortical system is shut down, and all that part which can allow us resourcefulness, which can allow creative solutions, which can allow us to strategize and come up with wonderful ways to deal with the stress, that part of the brain starts shutting down because we're constantly in a place of stress. So how can we reverse that? How can we teach our autonomic nervous system to not get into this automatic response? That's the work that we have to do. And the wonderful part is that we can do it. We can teach our system to do it. I mean, everything is, there are some things which are more difficult, and I'm sure that the therapists here will know about that much more than me. For me, this was exciting because it, like I said, it just gave me a way to understand the world and bring two parts of my world together. So what happened? Oh, sorry. So I'm just going to go back to some sharing and then we will move on. So shifting states, like I said, the autonomic nervous system learns through experience, and repetition and assimilation are the key. And this is often why we don't create changes, because it's boring. You have to do the same thing again and again. You meditate every day. you do your yoga asanas every day, you do the somatic exercises every day, or whatever it is the practice that you have created for yourself to be able to shift out of that state of fight or flight into a ventral vagal, or to shift out of the freeze response into a ventral vagal, because that's the place we would prefer to be most of the times, or maybe at least into the state of the sympathetic nervous system. From a freeze, any movement is good. You want to move from there. So again, like I spoke about it earlier, the rajas, any change needs rajas. It needs the sympathetic nervous system to come online. So we just have to do it again and again and again. And the learning is also by slowing down, because that allows the mind to, the brain to assimilate the new responses that it has to create for itself. Slowing down is also key to it. So the slow, the world of somatic movement, somatic experience, Feldenkrais, all of that is about slowing down. Actually, much of yoga is also about slowing down. A lot of this power yoga, etc., is more exercise, which might be useful to come up, to move out of tamas, but it may not allow us to rewire and repattern our neurological responses, because for that slowness is key. And asana practices actually holding, moving into an asana and holding it for a while. That is the classical hatha yoga, where you hold the asana, because in that holding is when the repatterning happens, and not quickly moving out of one state to the other. So slowing down is most difficult for most of us. But if we don't slow down, we are stuck in that crazy, the speed of the mind and the anxiety that stays continuously. So we're going to get into 3 groups now, and let me copy paste. So group 1, I suppose, are we naming the breakout groups, Roshni?
Mom, you want me to rename? I can do that.
Yeah, maybe if you can. Group 1 can be ventral vagal or sattva, whatever you want to put. Group 2 can be rajas, or let's put that's simpler. And group 3 is tamas or dorsal vagal. And what I invite you to do is, in your rooms, to have a discussion about, what practices do you know of and that you can think of that in the ventral vagal sattva is of course of staying more in this state. So you can look at what allows you to be in this state of calm, to have clarity, to be centered, and what practices do you know that will allow you to build that muscle more of staying in that state for longer, or to quickly come into that state if you need to. If you're in the rajas group, then the fight flight response, what do you need to do to move out of there? Because you're not being very functional if you're being in the fight flight response. And one way to look at that is that the fight flight, if you can see, is a response of movement. So it's actually, it takes you away from your connection with the ground when you get into a fight or flight response. So what practices can you do to come out of the fight or flight into a more stable space, into a more grounded space, which is the more ventral vagal space? And freeze, if you can think of anything, what can you do to get a person to move? And we may not want to look at serious serious disorders like catatonia, etc. But, you know, some degree of freeze that some of us might face even day to day, where, you know, or a tamasic state where I just don't feel like doing anything today. I'm just like, I feel I don't want to do anything today. I just want to shut down. I feel overwhelmed. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the kind of constant messages that were coming. I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. And I actually just wanted to go into a quiet state for 3 days and not talk to anybody. So it's a little bit of an extreme of the flight. But what can you do to move out if you're like feeling complete inertia? You know, you don't want to move. Then what can you do to move out of there? So let's get into these breakout rooms.
Ma'am, how many minutes do you want me to set the breakout room?
I was about to say that. Maybe about 7 minutes each.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just a short discussion, because it would be nice to come back to the larger group.
Yes. So I'll open the breakout rooms.
Yes. So please, please join your room, and I hope the task is clear. Your room is labeled. So discuss what can you do to shift out of the flight or the dorsal vagal or freeze reaction, and in the ventral vagal, what practices can keep you there? Because how to move out of it, we all know. Huh?
We have not yet got the rooms.
No, the rooms are open.
No, we have not got the join.
You'll have to click on one of the room which you want to join, ma'am. There are 3 different rooms.
Oh, okay.
It's up to us to join whichever we want.
Yes.
Okay, you could also do that. Yeah, so choose the room, then choose what you wish to discuss. That's nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You or a question that you might still have.
Sorry, I have a question if I can ask.
Of course.
So, you know, while I have this state where I realize that I am in this emotion and I kind of become aware of that, and then I feel it also, and I give myself time also, you know, to kind of be in that sattva stage or be in the tamas stage, or, you know, feel all those emotions and take my time to kind of have a start and end to that emotion. But sometimes, you know, I get a little distracted again, and I feel you know, in some situations I feel agitated, and I feel, you know, that. And so my question is it okay to feel that even while you're practicing calmness? Or I mean, I know it's a continuous thing, but it's in writing, I think it is easy, but I mean, I feel that those feelings are stronger and they're more powerful than calmness sometimes.
I think, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, what you feel is what you feel. And sometimes the agitation is so strong that you cannot calm it down. And in fact, one of the yogic practices for that, therefore, is to have alternate stimulation and relaxation practices. So even when you're doing an asana practice, so for instance, you know, and especially if you have a lot of anxiety, then doing movement initially is a better idea than to expect somebody who has a tremendous amount of agitation, to expect them to be able to meditate is actually not the most practical thing. So in a typical yoga kind of approach, you will ask that person to do more asana practice, to do more breathing practices, and to alternate those with short relaxation. So then the those bursts of stimulation and relaxation slowly start bringing the body back to a lower level of homeostasis, bringing it back to normal. Because if you remember a slide I showed earlier, that because of the continuous stress, your baseline is actually shifted higher. So it's very hard. So we have to start slowly bringing it down. And then once that happens, you will find that your mind is able to be calm for longer and longer periods. So it is also about figuring out what this person needs. So I sometimes, this mindfulness has become such a big thing and everybody's talking about that, but it doesn't help everybody. And in fact, somebody who's in a freeze state, again, mindfulness is not a good practice at all. Anything that asks a person to be quiet, silent, introspective can worsen that freeze state tremendously. So those are good practices if you're not at any extreme, and then to come back into a more sattvic state, or if you're already there, then to how to increase that, because we might find moments of that and then we start increasing the duration of that by using some of these practices. But if you're in the extremes, then some of and you might actually end up feeling worse about yourself because you're not now able to keep your mind quiet. But that's what it is. That's the anxiety. So we have to find other ways to quieten the mind. And so physical movement followed by relaxation. So there's a beautiful practice that my university has created called cyclic meditation, which is about alternating asanas and then increasing the duration of relaxation, about 30-minute practice. Doing it daily for about a month, I think it just changes the way you feel. So there are many such practices that you can also create your own practice. Do Surya Namaskars, but then do Shavasana. After yoga, Shavasana is the one everybody wants to skip. That is the most important part of the whole exercise.
Yeah.
That is the most important part, because that's when the repatterning of the neurobiology is happening. If we don't give that time for relaxation, we're just going to stay on the treadmill forever.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions or any other realization or sharing that you'd like to bring from their small group?
Dr. Vasu, in my case, if I reflect on my things, Rajat dominates the life, and fortunately, I enjoy activity very. But when everything overwhelms, everything has a limit, and because of small stresses which I am not able to pinpoint, and if I get into tamas mode, then I find it difficult. Despite my best practices, my awareness, I start feeling that I am entering into the zone, and then I find it difficult to hold me back and come out from that and get into sattva mode. I have all the good practices of practicing like vipassana or even yogic practices. So I find it in a dilemma when I get into such situations. So anything, though I know intellectually that these are the things which can be done, but I sometimes find in a very helplessness situation. That's all.
Yeah. And I'm happy to answer that, but I'm also wondering if others here might have suggestions, because there's, I'm sure, lots of wisdom here, and I'd love to tap into that as well. So please feel free to add your voice to mine if anybody would like to say something. So I don't know, Rajiv, when you say you have your practices, but one is about doing them. Like I said, it's sometimes it's just the drudgery of it. You have to do these every single day, whether you like it or not, and doing it at a fixed time, so that, because then once that neural loop has got created, that I know I can sit still, then if I'm feeling overwhelmed by activity, I say, okay, now let me just sit down and do mindfulness practice for 5 minutes. My brain knows how to do it. But to expect it to become mindful when I've not been practicing every day, that's not going to actually happen. So then you might get pushed to the other extreme. The other thing is just slowing down. All these practices, even if you're doing yoga, whatever, if we want to get our body to learn how to move out of even tamas, you get into an activity mode. So first you have to do activity, but after the activity, even for for whatever, not for very long, if somebody is in a severe state of depression or whatever, then you won't keep it on. But just for a few seconds, just some quiet, maybe you might give them some chanting or something to allow the nervous system to register that there is a new pattern that is getting created. If we don't give that time for the nervous system to register the new pattern that is created, if I just move from one activity to another, to another, to another, actually my nervous system is not learning anything new. So
that may be a problem in my case, because it is from one activity to another and not allowing the whole system to pause and get into resting mode.
So some quiet time, some downtime. So, even if you're doing asanas, for example, after every 2-3 asanas, rest. That, rest till you get your breath back, then move. So all that is helpful. And hold an asana at the end. An asana is if you go to see, it's, we put our body in all kinds of weird contortions. And under the most stressful, we stress our body. But in that, what we are asking of ourselves is to relax in that final position. Prayatna Shaitilya Samapatibhyam. That's what Patanjali says about asana. So in that state of very strange body posture, we are learning to let go. So we are learning to how to relax even under the most stressed state. So if we don't follow that, if we just move from one dynamic asana to the other, the neural system again is not getting repatterned. And then we say, and then the yoga will have it is an exercise. Then it works as exercise. That is also fine if that's what you want to use it for. But it doesn't fulfill the basis of what yoga is all about.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Right. So any other statements, questions?
Vasu, I just want to say that it's going to be very helpful for me to look at myself in terms of these 3 states that you just explained. I was not aware of them at all. So this is going to be really very helpful for me. And what you said later on in the session, I can completely relax. It was like a very aha moment for me when you said that all practices are not helpful to everybody. It's what you've got to look at, what your predominant state is, and then select. Because for me, like meditation, I just couldn't meditate at all. And after 5 years of doing movement practice with yoga and breathing practices, that is when I learned Vipassana, I could actually practice it with a certain regularity. So I can relate to it from my experience. So what I have done intuitively is what you just said. That was remarkable. Thank you so much.
I'm glad. And I think it's so important to not beat ourselves up because we can't do certain things. I think, and that, because that actually is counterproductive, no? Because now I'm adding to my own stress. So just accepting where you are. I mean, yoga is about that. You start from a place of acceptance. This is who I am today. This is what I am today. And now from here, I might choose to change. I might choose not to change. But if we do not accept, it's what Fritz Perls says, what we love to quote, what you resist persists, what you accept transforms. So acceptance is at the heart of everything. I want to just share one slide before we close, and then we can just take some closing comments. Sorry, not this one. So just saying that actually, as much as I'm comparing the two, I'm also I'm also pulling them apart, saying that 3 states, I said again and again, are more biological. And they are, the gunas operate in this field of Manomaya, Pranamaya, and Annamaya, these last three koshas, as it is called, the last three sheets or the last three states of consciousness. And this is the world that we get engaged in, and that's the physical material world, and this is the world of the gunas, and that's where they operate. And the biology, of course, of it is also therefore in these three, so they match really beautifully. But health of in Sanskrit is called swasth, and swasth means is two words. It's swa asti. Swa is self and asti is to be established in. So it means to be established in my own true self. And so true health, true sense of flourishing, well-being is what is going beyond these three gunas and going to the Jnanamaya and the Anandamaya. That is your true state, where you can come from a place of discrimination. Because even understanding that this I need to change. And, one is from a very instinctive space of saying, okay, I'm in this state, let me shift state. Very powerful. I do not wish to bring that to low, to kind of, reduce its importance. It's very, very, I think, empowering to be able to do that. And we can go beyond that. And that is what yoga invites. That's what yoga says is possible for us, to go beyond that and to go beyond this play of getting caught in even the sattva or whatever, and to move beyond and to operate from a place which is a place of discrimination, viveka, which is, from a place of true knowledge, from a place of values. I found a Greek word. Aristotle created this concept of eudaimonia. I loved it. Doesn't exactly mean swasth, but it also is it comes from a state. It is also about being the best of what is possible as a human being. That's what he called it. So that's the invitation really, to take charge of one's own ability to shift states, and all of them, might be valuable at some point of time, but also to see that there is more possible. So that brings me to the end. Thank you so much for joining me. It was and for listening to my own musings about these two things that have come together. And anybody, any more questions? Again, very happy to stay back.
Thank you, Vasu. I think you attempted something pretty impossible, very daring, that you actually gave a structure, an underlying structure to health, to the way our neurobiology works, combining the ancient wisdom and the modern terminology of the polyvagal theory. So yoga and polyvagal theory coming together, and that whole ventral vagal and the rest and digest phase, which is the one we miss all the time. We think success and is about, activity and achievement, and we forget enough to slow down and rest. So the repeated emphasis that you put on rest and integration is something we needed to hear. So, and this is also the last session of the day. So it's, we are slowly entering into that phase of rest in ourselves. So thank you for